What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Politics with Steve. All right, y'all. So we have to talk about the latest drop of Epstein emails. Some of these emails I find insane. And like I said, I got to discuss them with y'all. But before we get into that, I want to ask everybody to take a second, subscribe to my YouTube page, sign up for my email list, link in the description. That is the best way to stay in the loop on all things politics with Steve. And without further ado, let's get to it. So, like I said, I'm gonna walk y'all through what I think is the 5 most important emails, starting with the first thing. Now, this first thing I honestly think is extremely important and it's been underreported on, honestly. Jeffrey Epstein literally confirmed that he's been consulting with Russian officials on how to deal with Donald Trump. Literally, that's exactly what he said. Let's take a look at the email and then we're gonna discuss it. All right, so we see Chuckin was great. He understood Trump after our conversations. Looking down, he says, you might want to suggest to Putin, the president of Russia, that Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, can get insights on talking to me. And then he says that Chuckin, who was the United Nations ambassador to Russia, he's died, but he's saying that he used to talk to Chuckin and he's basically looking for a new contact. This here is insane to me. Like, whatever it is that Jeffrey Epstein had on Donald Trump, he's clearly handing it over to the Russians. So I don't know what more we need to conclude that Trump is compromised. Like, it's right here. So let's take a look at what I would say is the second thing that I want to point out to y'all. All right, so number 2, Epstein writes, have them ask my houseman about Donald walking through the door, leaving his nose print on the glass as young women were swimming in the pool. He was so focused, he walked straight into the door. Bruh, imagine that. Imagine being so focused to watch little girls swimming in a pool that you run straight into a glass and leave your note. That's embarrassing and is sick. Again, this immediately made me think about like how he used to talk about peeping on pageant girls because he owned the pageant. He was just able to go behind stage. Like, all right, so up next, we have this email from Jeffrey Epstein in 2015. And he seemed to be suggesting that he had a 20-year-old girlfriend. And after 2 years, he gave that girlfriend to Donald Trump. I, you know, I don't know how these guys get down, but as soon as I heard this, I immediately thought about Jeffrey Epstein. And let me just show y'all this real quick. Um, Holding this check for $22,500. Now, I want to remind y'all that this check, the note to the check said that it was for a fully depreciated girl. If things like this was happening between them two, where they was paying each other for women, we would know about this from bank statements, which is some of the evidence that Congress is trying to get released. JP Morgan, who was Epstein's bank at the time, handed over to the federal government records of over 4,700 payments to Jeffrey Epstein, totaling about $1.1 billion as potential evidence of Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking ring. All right, so this next post, the famous I Know How Dirty Donald Is, when I originally read this, I, assumed that he was talking about Trump and Epstein's sort of sick relationship, right? But then as I read it, I realized that he appeared to be talking about financial crimes, specifically the ones that Michael Cohen committed, and implying that it was at the direction of Donald Trump. Again, in these emails, he's saying that, it was Trump's money, which was correct. He said that Trump knowingly falsified the documents. Trump lied about it. The payments were disguised as legal services. And, he's basically saying that I know how dirty in the sense of corruption Trump is. Again, he's more so talking about how much he understands Trump's personality. All right, so this last email is along those same lines, right? He wrote to his lawyer, have one of your cronies ask to see the mortgage to Mar-a-Lago. Cash from the electrician union. His driver, Matt, was the bag man. Later, he made an exec at the public company. And a $30 million loan from the casino to Donald Trump, backdated. Again, he's suggesting that he understands Trump. He understands his inner workings. He understands that there's fraud here and there. This is probably why Trump don't want the Epstein files being public, because Jeffrey Epstein clearly understands Trump and have evidence as to the crimes that Trump commit regularly. And in addition to that, just helping people understand how he thinks and how he moves and where could you look to find these things. All right, so I got one bonus thing I want to show y'all, right? So I showed y'all the 5 things I thought was most important, but let me show y'all this one bonus thing. So right here, Jeffrey Epstein is clearly saying that the stories about Bill Clinton coming to Epstein Island was false. All right, y'all, but I want to circle back to an email that we discussed that was a part of the first batch of emails, right? Because as I'm on the internet, on X, some of the responses I seen from Trump supporters was just insane. So let me pull this email up and then we're going to talk about it. All right, so this is the email we discussed between Jeffrey Epstein and his number two, Ghislaine Maxwell. Again, email is from 2011, long before Trump was ever involved in politics. So, you know, there's no reason for Democrats to be cooking up a hoax against him at this time, right? And this is the email in which he says, victim spent hours at my house with him, referring to Donald Trump. The supporters of Trump seem to believe that because the victim was allegedly Virginia Dufresne, one of Epstein's victims that, Trump admitted he stole from Mar-a-Lago. And I guess because this victim at a point said, Trump has never been inappropriate or she's never witnessed him being inappropriate, they are using this as, I guess, a defense to Trump. I guess they're trying to, act like this exonerates him when in actuality it does not. It actually does the exact opposite. In 2019, Trump said he had a falling out with Epstein a long time ago, and he don't think he spoke to him for over 15 years. In 2019, he said that. We don't even have to do the math to understand that, 2011, Trump being at his house was much less than 15 years. And just July of this year, he said, Epstein stole people that worked for him and he kicked them out of his club. Again, this was in the early 2000s, but here Epstein is proven that false. Why would Jeffrey Epstein be lying about this in 2011? So I want to talk to y'all about some other very interesting developments that came just from this email. All right, so this is a lawyer, George Conway, right? And what he said was, one of the things that was interesting about the emails is that they showed Todd Blanche's questioning of Ghislaine Maxwell was either completely incompetent or intentionally crafted to not elicit facts incriminating Trump. Now, the reason he's saying this is one of the things that Ghislaine was questioned on was whether or not she knew about Trump spending time at Epstein's place, right? This email proves that she absolutely, in fact, knew about it. Now, remember, the way that this interview came about was just completely unusual. We talked about this before, but the number two guy, Trump's former personal attorney, Todd Blanche, now Deputy Attorney General at the Department of Justice, goes to talk to Ghislaine Maxwell. Again, that is something that is just very unusual. We discussed that in detail in a prior video. And I've yet to hear a good explanation as to why he was conducting this interview. And when Ghislaine Maxwell said, she didn't know about any occurrences with Trump at Epstein's house, if the government had this information, why not specifically say, well, reference the 2011 email in which she discussed Trump being at Epstein's house? That's a reasonable question. And that is why George Conway is asking this, right? Now, the response that Todd Blanche gave was just stupid. So, he got to insult George. He said, you've never been confused for a trial lawyer. But he then says that law enforcement didn't have the materials Epstein estate hid for years and only just provided to Congress. Stop talking. It's unbecoming. Now, since Todd Blanche said that, the Epstein estate, which is maintained by, lawyers and people in charge of, making sure all of his assets are distributed properly and stuff like that, people that has nothing to do with this situation came out and said, that's a lie. We have provided everything that the government asked for, and we have not withheld anything. So, again, it is very clear that, Todd Blanche was not trying to really seek anything that was incriminating to Trump. By the way, we know that the government did have this information because Ghislaine Maxwell specifically referenced some of the stuff that we just found out about in the email, like the birthday book. So there is no reason that Todd Blanche shouldn't have asked this. So after this interview that Ghislaine Maxwell had with Todd Blanche, she was transferred to a minimum security prison, a prison that, based on her crimes, she wasn't even eligible to be in. Not only was she transferred there, a whistleblower stated that she's been getting preferential treatment. I mean, they say she has custom meals. They say she gets after hour access to the gym facility so she don't have to interact with other inmates. She even got a puppy in there, like an emotional support pet. Again, she shouldn't even be eligible to be in this prison. So you got to ask yourself, why is Trump going through extremes to make things cozy for Ghislaine Maxwell? We also know that she is about to ask Trump to commute her sentence. Hey,